Hi, I'm Flip Padot. Welcome to Old Bull TV. Today is a special day as we're debuting a whole new show within the channel. It's called The Map Room, and it features three very bright young political analysts who use data-driven mapping to visualize and communicate their election forecasts and analyses. Now, if you attended our 2020 political prediction conference last month, you might recall that one of our sessions was focused on this rapidly expanding field of political cartography, and the moderator of that panel, Eric Cunningham, who is the editor-in-chief of Elections Daily, is joining us as host of the Map Room. Co-hosting with Eric are Jared Stone and Nick Morris, and in this pilot episode, they're delving into the demographics of southern suburbia. And the picture that emerges from their analysis reveals that the real 2020 swing states might not be the ones we think. If they're right, some of these races are going to catch the forecasters and some prediction market traders by surprise. Now, admittedly, the bulk of this is well over my head, which is why after this introduction, for everyone's sake, I mostly excuse myself from on-camera duties for this show other than to pop in and ask the occasional stupid question or to turn viewers' attention to interesting trading opportunities or other prediction market implications of the map maker's insights. So, let's get to it. Thank you for joining us as we welcome Eric, Jared, and Nick to the channel. I hope you enjoy The Map Room.
Hey there, I'm Eric Cunningham of Elections Daily, and welcome to the Map Room. We're going to be showing through election maps how some of the demographic and political trends in American politics today are working. So today we have with us Nick and Jared.
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm a contributor of Elections Daily. I'm mainly focused on redistricting content, which I post a lot of on Twitter. Yeah, my handle's Toss Up Report if you want to follow me.
Hello, my name is Jared Stone. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. My Twitter handle is @JStonePolitics. The things I mainly go into are basically redistricting using a lot of Day's redistricting app, as well as sort of analysis of districts. I'm going to college next year. I'm currently in high school, and I'm very excited about delving in more into election Twitter.
He is hosted in the panel that I did with J. Miles Coleman and Drew Savicki, that Georgia is an interesting state and that it's not looking very good for Republicans long term, mainly due to the suburbs. So we had an excellent article in Elections Daily today from Cole Perry about suburbs. You tend to usually think of these places as Republican, but really they're not a monolith. There's Republican suburbs, there's Democratic suburbs, there's swingy suburbs. The definition of a suburb itself is questionable, what it exactly entails. But Georgia is an example of kind of the polarization within suburbs, in my opinion, and in his opinion, which is that some of them are getting very Republican and very Democratic. You're seeing that purple kind of go away. And it's definitely something to take a look at long term, specifically in Georgia. I don't know if Nick or Jared have a comment here.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I have this article right in front of me. I think it's making a great point. I think the idea of some suburbs in general trending Democratic. I mean, it's a good point. But if you've seen what I put on Twitter, I'm very against this idea that the areas are quickly moving to the left or to the right. I think it happens, but you got to have a few prerequisites in place. So, like in Georgia, for instance, which we're focusing on now. You do see a lot of population growth in those areas. You've actually got demographic trends in those areas. Some areas like growing more in African Americans. I haven't studied the area in detail, but I know that's the case in some areas.
Like Gwinnett County is a majority minority county.
And I was looking at Forsyth County the other day. That's about 10 times as big as it was 30 years ago.
And back in the day, Forsyth was quite literally, there were no black people in the county. I believe it was as recently as 50 years ago. It was like they did not have anyone there, and it's experiencing rapid growth, and some of it is from minority populations.
Yeah, it's still very red. It's still very red, but I think it's slowly moving towards Democrats. But yeah, long term, I think these these shifts will be bad news for Republicans, but there's no way of knowing.
Absolutely, and I'm inclined to agree with pretty much all of your points. It's clear that Atlanta is moving to the left. Not only Fulton County, and when you look at Fulton County, you have to really observe the northern areas of Fulton County and not really Atlanta proper. Places like Johns Creek and sort of the Georgia 6th congressional district that covers a large swath of northern Fulton County. And that area is moving very drastically to the left, as well as, of course, Cobb County, Gwinnett County, even to the south, DeKalb County, Henry County, they're all moving to the left in a certain way. But Forsyth County is very interesting because it's hard to observe from afar the fact that it's actually moving very, very rapidly to the left, even in certain cases more rapidly than the other counties in the Atlanta metropolitan area. And just to not dwell on it, but there are also obviously some areas in Georgia that are experiencing population decline that are not moving to the left and are in fact moving to the right in some cases. If you look at Sanford Bishop's district, the 2nd congressional district, with places like Albany, those are kinds of places that are majority African American. This district was created as a VRA district. However, because of basically the blue collar nature of the district, because the fact that the Georgia Democratic brand is sort of refocusing itself and reshifting itself away from those kinds of areas into Atlanta and the metropolitan area there, you're starting to see the Democratic Party become less prominent there. And just one more note from my own experiences is that I actually wrote an article a little way back when talking about Harris County, Texas. And Harris County, Texas, as you all very well know, is another county that's moving very rapidly to the left. But there are areas such as in northern Harris County, as well as in northeastern Harris County, that are moving to the right. And you sort of get to see that political polarization that happens not only in the states, but within the counties themselves. And so you're right, Eric, to say that the forces are not monolithic. They apply in different ways. They stretch out things in very different ways. And the uniform swing that goes across all different areas is not necessarily existent. There are some areas that are moving very rapidly to the left. And it requires us to look at the demography there and the geography there, as well as the political history there to really analyze why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. And I think we'll go into I'll show a picture of Georgia's political trends and demographic trends in a second, but I want to go back to what you said about Fulton County, which is an excellent point. So I'm going to show up Fulton County here. So what people don't realize about Fulton County is it's a very Democratic county, right? It has Atlanta. It's majority African-American, but it's actually a very diverse county in terms of the political and demographic areas. So for example, northern Fulton County, traditionally from about this line right here, is traditionally Republican. And not just traditionally Republican, it's extremely Republican, to the point that the county, that the northern areas actually wanted to secede from the county for a long time because they weren't happy with their taxpayer dollars going down from the wealthy areas to the more impoverished areas in urban Atlanta. And so this kind of shows that these areas went from strongly Republican, extremely Republican, to narrowly voting for Donald Trump, if voting for him at all. So that's Fulton County. I'm going to go ahead and show on a map I kind of put together of the demographic trends of Georgia. So specifically, let me pull this up right here if we can see it.
Sorry, Eric, can I add a comment real quickly?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah,
perfect.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But I just sort of want to bring up the fact that northern Fulton County is very distinct. And even to this day, it does lean Republican. And there's still some fairly Republican areas. The DNA and the identity still exists. But if you actually look at back in 2018, when Lucy McBath won the 6th district away from Karen Handel, basically Karen Handel won the Cobb part of it, as well as very, very narrowly winning the northern Fulton part of the district, whereas DeKalb went very, very strongly to McBath. And so it'll be interesting this year to see whether McBath can finally claim the northern Fulton County areas and get that to swing her way even more. So that's sort of something that we'll need to see.
Yeah, perfect. And if I had a map of that ready, I would show it. But it was a very narrow win for her in that spot. The Republicans arguably lost that seat because they drew a poor map. They drew in DeKalb County, which is very similar to Fulton in that it has a minority South and a more white northern area. They drew in that northern area and it kind of bit them in the butt. But so I'll go ahead and show this right here. So the Atlanta metropolitan area makes about 55% of the area of Georgia, the population of Georgia, sorry. And it's also I mean, it's obviously the biggest part of the state. It's growing rapidly. You can see the only areas of growth in Georgia pretty much are in the Atlanta area or the areas close to Atlanta, adjacent to Atlanta. Downstate, the areas Democrats are starting to do worse in, they're declining in terms of population. This is important. This is important mainly because uniformly, every single county in that area pretty much of Georgia is trending to the Democratic Party. And they're either trending at light speed or they're trending slowly. So for example, Forsyth, notice it right there. It's trending strongly to the Democratic Party. And I think Miles said this in the conference, it's a difference in winning it by 80 to 20, going from like 75 to 25. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're talking about here. Whereas in Gwinnett, it's different. It's in Cobb, DeKalb, even Fulton. It's different. So that's kind of the baseline of Georgia. So I'm going to go over to Nick and Jared, see if I have any final thoughts before I mention why Georgia is so important right now.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just want to bring something in because I was actually looking at this today when I was doing some maps of Alabama. I was looking at how in the suburbs you do have those areas like in Forsyth County where you go from like 80-20 to 70-30. Like most people will look at that and think that's no difference. It's heavily Republican either way. But if you got a district like Georgia 7th, for instance, which includes Forsyth, that's the red part of it. That's the Republican anchor of the district. So Republicans will need to run really big margins up in there to have a shot in the district. If Forsyth is going to Republicans by 30 points or so, then that's going to be a huge blow to them, even though 30 points is still a huge victory.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I basically have two comments. The first one is that the 7th is going to be an interesting case because Forsyth is, again, as you said, Nick, the Republican anchor of the district. But Gwinnett is a county that I believe will move even more blue in 2020 than it was in 2018. And even if you look down at the state legislative districts, I forgot the number of this district that I'm about to talk about, but there's a district there that basically was uncontested, I believe, back in 2018. And so it has a Republican incumbent right now, but it voted very heavily for Clinton and for Stacey Abrams back in 2018. And now that there's a Democratic challenger, the Democrats actually favored to gain that state legislative district. And it sort of looks like an anchor. So I apologize for not knowing the number of that district. My second comment is that going back to the map that Eric previously showed, I sort of noticed that right sort of next to Forsyth County is Hall County. And I was doing some research recently about Hall County. Basically, Gainesville is a major city there. Doug Collins is from there. That I'm sure we're going to be talking about him later. But even Hall County, which is in a very Republican district, Doug Collins hails from a very, very Republican district, one of the most Republican in the country. But even Hall County is moving to the left. And so it can't really escape the major shifts and demographic trends that we're seeing basically originate in Atlanta and just spread out.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just the center of the city. It's not like Charlotte or Raleigh or Greensboro in North Carolina, where it's just the urban core and some of the inner suburbs that are starting to go really strongly Democratic. This is the exurbs. This is counties that are far out of the way that are starting to trend that way. And so the reason Georgia is so important right now is there are actually 2 Senate races in Georgia this year, in addition to a presidential election. In the first Senate race, you have the incumbent, David Perdue, who was elected in 2014 over a Democratic challenger. She was actually a very credible candidate, Michelle Nunn, the daughter of a former very popular governor. She had the endorsement of most of the old guard of the Georgia Democratic Party, even like the, what was his name, the Senator Zeller. He was so conservative, he spoke at the 2004 Republican National Convention, like that sort of old guard Democrat. They were endorsing her, and she lost. This time you have him. So people thought that, they have a credible challenger last time, that he would be safe. But actually polls are showing a very close race. The most recent polls showed that John Ossoff, who was the Republican or the Democratic challenger in Karen Handel's district, in the special election, not the 2018 election, but the special election, one of the most expensive in American history, that he had a 2-point lead with Tomlinson, another Democrat, behind only by a couple. and another Democrat only down by about 3 points. So that was the first Senate race that kind of was showing alarm bells. And then the second one is the one that's in the news. Incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler has had some scandals as of late. She was appointed by the governor to fill a vacancy that left by the death of Johnny Isakson, I believe, or resignation. And so that seat is open, and it's a special election. It's actually a jungle primary. So the top two challengers from that, so the top two finishers from the election date will face a rematch, assuming none of them get 50%. Polls have shown her behind, she's actually in fourth place behind a Republican and two Democrats. So I'll kind of hand it off to, I guess, Jared or Nick to kind of explain the basics of that Georgia race, because that's the one people are wanting to pay attention to right now because of the incumbent scandals with Kelly Loeffler.
Nick, maybe you want to do one and then I'll do the other, if that's okay with you.
No, I wanted to talk about I had a few things to say about the special election, because you got Loeffler there. She's very far behind in the polls. And I mean, you might think, looking at that race, that she's an incumbent, she might have an advantage. But you probably find that that's not as much the case as you think it would be, because you had an analysis from Nate Silver during the 2018 elections. I'm not sure if he did it before, but you have that analysis from him. He decided in his model to not include an incumbency advantage onto anyone, any incumbent who was appointed, not elected. So I found that really interesting, and I think that's a dynamic that you can look for in pretty much any election. And any election which doesn't have an elected incumbent. This is the same in governor's races, the same in Senate races, and it applies to Loeffler as well, because she's very unpopular in the district. She has some scandals, and she pretty much has nothing to back her up. So I'm of the opinion that she's toast. Either what will happen is the Democratic field is so splintered that Collins and Loeffler go through the top two, and then Collins wins easily. Which has been the case in some polls, and what you'll have is a race between Collins and a Democrat, which remains to be seen what happens. But yeah, I don't think Loeffler has a chance. I think that would be Democrats' dream if she did get to the top two primary with a Democrat, because she's very far behind in one of the polls. I can't remember which firm it was who put that poll out, but yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
And just to add some additional information, and then eventually go into the other Senate race. The whole idea of Kelly Loeffler being appointed to the Senate in the first place represented sort of a feud between Governor Brian Kemp as well as President Donald Trump. Back when Governor Kemp was running and basically facing a very, very contentious primary with, I believe, Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, Trump gave his endorsement to Kemp. And so in a lot of ways, Kemp's whole status and position being the governor of Georgia is very much attributable to President Trump's endorsement. And so when President Trump believed that Doug Collins would make a better replacement for Johnny Isakson, who was stepping down last year, I believe, Kemp objected because in a very intelligent way, he believed that having a female senator would be the best way to try to appeal to those women and to those suburbanites that had drifted away from the Republican Party in recent years. And so theoretically, his choice should have been the ideal situation for Republicans, appointing someone who could appeal to those audiences. However, Kelly Loeffler's various scandals, her insider trading, and basically the general belief that she is totally unrepresentative of the people of Georgia because of her status and because of her wealth has really backfired in a way. And Governor Kemp is in a very difficult position now because Doug Collins is looking to take the first place in the jungle primary, and Kelly Loeffler is basically at third or fourth at best. And she is highly unpopular. The people of Georgia generally do not like her. And basically the Republican crowd that ushered in Donald Trump's victory in Georgia in 2016 is much more centered around sort of the firebrand sort of model that Doug Collins presents, rather than sort of the suburban model that Kelly Loeffler was made to represent. And just to go into the other Senate race too, talking about Jon Ossoff versus David Perdue, as was mentioned before, Jon Ossoff ran unsuccessfully in the special election for Georgia's 6th district back in 2017. It was a race that garnered a lot of national media attention, but Karen Handel managed to win by around 5 points. However, she lost the seat around 1 point later in 2018. And so it's interesting to sort of theorize and hypothesize whether Jon Ossoff, no matter if he wins or loses, will be able to finally win the 6th district. And based on what's happening right now, based on the races that transpired in 2018 and the results that happened there, because 2018 basically presented a lot of near misses for Republicans and a lot of very, very close races, all the Democrats were able to win the 6th district, though losing by 3 to 5 points. And so if Jon Ossoff is able and is capable of actually making a really close race or even winning, then he's going to have a really good chance at winning the 6th district and possibly even the 7th district as well. And that's going to have a lot of down ballot effects for the Republicans and Democrats who are running in the congressional races, as well as up ballot. And it'll sort of determine, in a way, President Trump's performance in those districts as well.
Mm-hmm. And I'll go ahead and share a map of the 6th congressional district, give viewers an idea of what we're talking about here. So this is the 6th congressional district. This is the race that Jon Ossoff lost, the most expensive congressional race in history at that point. So you notice that he lost Cobb and he lost Fulton, and then he won the DeKalb portion. The DeKalb portion is the portion Republicans inexplicably stuck in there for some reason, because they assumed they could get away with it at the time, and they didn't. So this is what it looked like back then. If he's polling the way he's polling right now, if it's even a close race, he should be winning this district, I would think, just based on how it's looking. The interesting thing with Loeffler, to me, is that I was in the camp. She was a good candidate in theory. She's a businesswoman. She's from Atlanta. She's rich, so basically she could fund her own campaign. And then she was basically governing as a senator. She was acting as a very outspoken conservative. So she was kind of trying to emulate Trump while being from the suburbs. The problem was when some stock sales around the time of the coronavirus came to light, which kind of soured everyone to her. She actually put out an interesting ad recently where she was trying to say that this is the radical left going after her like they went after Trump. That she's a successful businesswoman and they just go after successful business people who are conservatives. Whether or not that is effective remains to be seen. But it is an interesting attempt by her, I think, to try and redirect some of this. It's worth noting that Georgia has a unique law for Senate races. Before anyone thinks about like, okay, we're going to get on the bandwagon, Georgia's flipping, I'm going to put all my predicted bets there. Georgia's actually tricky for Democrats to win at the Senate level because it has a rule that if no candidate receives 50% of the vote, it goes to a runoff. This applies to both the jungle primary race, which is the Loeffler-Collins race, as well as the Perdue, Ossoff, whoever the other Democrat is race. So if you don't get 50%, the race goes to a runoff. This actually happened in 2008, where the Republican did not get that percentage of the vote. And so it was a very close race. I think he won by 3%, but below that 50% threshold. Once the special election, the runoff actually occurred, where those are the only two candidates on the ballot, there was lower turnout and he romped to victory, mainly because voters didn't want to give Democrats a supermajority, is what that would mean at this point. Yeah, Nick, go ahead and share that map if you have the precinct map. That would kind of give a good idea of Georgia's 6th. The reason we focus on Georgia's 6th congressional district so much is because of that northern Fulton portion we talked about earlier. This is the sort of area the wealthy, white, fiscally conservative, more neutral on social issues, that was never a driving factor in the area. That's the one type of suburb that's kind of trending to the left. There are other suburbs that are trending Republican. Long Island, New York has a more working class identity, likes more abrasive politicians. So Trump actually won Long Island, the first time a Republican had won Long Island at the presidential level in years. So that's the type of suburbs that's gone a little bit more to the Republican Party. But the reason Georgia is so concerning for Republicans is because it's that one type that is strongly going to the Democratic Party. And if they can't stop the bleeding in Atlanta, there's little real hope they can win long term because they're already polling the 80-90% margins in the rural counties in the north. And the counties in the south are diverse with a minority population of around 30% at minimum. So that already puts a cap on what they can get to. So that's kind of the thought process behind some of these polls. And I think it's kind of indicating a long-term realignment in Georgia. This is the vote margin by precinct for Georgia's 6th congressional district, kind of the ground zero of realignment in Georgia. This is northeastern Cobb County, northern Fulton County, and northern DeKalb County. three counties that are either suburban Atlanta or part of the same county as Atlanta. So I'll kind of give it to one of you two to explain what this kind of means.
So basically, there are a few cities that are essential in understanding and analyzing this map. So let's first go to Cobb County. That blue section sort of near the middle is sort of around where Marietta is. And Marietta is one of the major cities of Cobb County. I believe it's Lucy McBath's hometown. And it is a city that is diversifying and it's growing. And it's one of the main reasons why Cobb County has moved very left in recent years and is no longer really competitive for Republicans. Going over to Fulton County, which is the main county of this, there are a few cities that are essential to understand in Fulton County. I mentioned Johns Creek before. There's also Roswell, which is where Karen Handel is from. There's Alpharetta, Sandy Springs, and other cities like that. These are very highly educated areas. They're also very diverse. And so there's a heavy Caucasian presence there, but there's also a growing Asian American community. And there's also, Hispanics and African Americans there who are helping helping the area become more college educated, basically. And so sort of the light blue or pinkish areas are areas that are moving left. And in large part, those are the areas that basically handed Lucy McBath a victory in 2018. And then going over to DeKalb County, obviously it's very blue. It sort of is how Atlanta spills over into other counties. There's a heavy minority presence there. The one main red area, as you can see, sort of in the north there is basically Dunwoody, which is a very wealthy, still relatively white area of the Georgia suburbs, or the Atlanta suburbs, rather. However, it is still diversifying. And as you can see, it is sort of pinkish and light red. Now, if you looked at this map, in 2012 with Mitt Romney's victory, where he basically swamped to an over 20% victory in this district, you would see a lot more very, very dark red. And the light blue areas and sort of the moderately blue areas would be Republican. They would be in the Republican column. And so that's just sort of my 2 cents essentially on the political geography of this district.
Yeah, and so that's a big thing to understanding in Georgia specifically is that an interesting dynamic in DeKalb is that it is a majority minority county. It's actually large enough to contain a single congressional district if someone wanted to do that. But the northern area is the traditionally Republican area of this district. And you can see it's basically almost gone. This could feasibly be gone by 2020 if the reaction is strong enough in Georgia, like some of the polls are indicating. Because the polls are actually indicating a close race, presidential level, within 3 percentage points, I think. Whereas the last several races in Georgia have been within the 5 to 8% range. So not really competitive, but also not incredibly safe for Republicans either. So that's kind of the overview of the Senate race. The presidential level is a different story because you have to look at the entirety of Georgia. So I'm going to go ahead and show a comparison of 2 states. So I'm going to show the comparison of Georgia and of North Carolina, which I discussed this previously, but I think it's worth going back to this. So you can see right here, North Carolina is a more traditionally swing state. It went to Obama in 2008 by around 11,000 votes. It has a lot of growing metropolitan areas. It's about the same population as Georgia, a little bit smaller. I think it may actually be larger at this point. But one of them only had 13 compared to 14 congressional districts. And so if you notice these swings in North Carolina, you'll notice that basically from 2008 to 2016, everywhere that wasn't a big city, county, or Nash County, Wilson area, which are rural areas with large minority populations, all of those have swung Republican to some degree. So they've kind of returned home to some level. And if you look at the population shift, you'll notice the spread is throughout the state is pretty even. You have blue counties that are growing, but you also have red counties. The Union County, Cabarrus, Gaston, those are all trending Republican, even as they're growing exponentially along with Charlotte. Brunswick County, next to New Hanover, is a vacation area. It's went from 100,000 to 150,000 people, and it's only going more and more Republican as retirees kind of swarm in. So Republicans have hope in North Carolina that these areas can long-term save the state for them. Whereas in Georgia, you notice, compare the presidential swing over here, where Atlanta metro area is just getting bluer and bluer. The rest of the state's kind of getting redder, but the rest of the state is dying in terms of population growth. They're either not gaining or a lot of that presidential swing is from older voters that are dying off. I don't know if Jared or Nick have a comment about this area, but I just found the comparison fascinating because people have traditionally assumed that North Carolina will be a blue state in a few cycles, and that Georgia might be purple state in a few cycles. But to me, it seems more like North Carolina can be competitive for a long time, whereas Georgia's a candidate to become a Colorado or a Virginia, where you have a single metropolitan area that has just rocketed the state towards the Democratic Party.
Yeah, a lot of good information there, and it's interesting to compare the two states. I'd like to go a little bit into something that I think really encapsulates the idea that Republican areas are growing in North Carolina, sort of not the same way as they are in Georgia, but I'd like to look at the 9th District, which has had some notoriety in recent years because of its 2018 election, which was one of the most competitive ones, as well as the special election in 2019, I believe. So it's a traditionally Republican area that's comprised of the Charlotte suburbs. And the Charlotte suburbs in the district basically make the shape of a wedge. So it's called basically the wedge or the Charlotte wedge. And it's a very traditionally Republican area. Sort of the embodiment of the Whole Foods suburbs, very wealthy, very well educated, and very historically Republican. And then it takes in some other counties on the southern border of North Carolina. As you can see next to the Charlotte wedge, you can see Union County, which is basically exurban Charlotte. And you keep going, you see some other Republican areas. And one of the most famous counties, one that we talk about a lot on election Twitter, is Robeson County, which is right here, which is in the blue. Now, if you consider the two elections, you'll see that some of the areas went right and other ones went left, basically. So basically, the reason why we needed a special election in this district is because back in 2018, there was some fraud that happened in the election in this district. You had Dan McCready on the Democratic side, and then you had conservative pastor Mark Harris on the Republican side. And the results were not certified because there was belief that there was some fraud there. So basically had a redo election. And Mark Harris decided not to run again. And so a man named Dan Bishop took his place. And Bishop actually represented the wedge in the state legislature. And the interesting thing, which is sort of ironic, is that when you compare his victory, which he won by around 2 points, I believe, in the 2019 special, and when you compare that to the 2018 election, the Charlotte wedge actually shifted left by around 3 points. And that's his home turf. So that's pretty problematic for Republicans because their Democrats won the Charlotte wedge by around 9 in 2018, which was obviously a Democratic gain from Trump's 4-point lead in the Charlotte wedge back in 2016. But in the special election, the Democrats won it by 12. So they gained 3 points there. Now, the reason why the district remained red is because places like Union County remained very solidly Republican, and the Robeson County, which has a very large population of the Lumbee Indian tribe, they actually shifted very much to the right. It's sort of an interesting dynamic there that I don't want to get into too much. But basically what you see here is that even though the traditionally Republican areas of major cities are starting to move left at very rapid speeds, other areas of the state, and in this case, other areas of the district, are able to keep it relatively stable and prevent Democrats from gaining too much on Republicans.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to try and pull up a map here of the shift in the area, but from what I recall, it was that literally the only area that trended left from 2018 to 2019 was the Charlotte wedge. Every other county in the district trended to the right, from Union County all the way to Cumberland County, which is an interesting phenomenon in North Carolina, right? The district is, I like to call it the Thanos district because it's perfectly balanced. Democrats gain in one area, Republicans gain in the other. It's definitely an interesting phenomenon. Whereas in Georgia, there's not something like that. It's not like they're gaining, and it's not like Democrats are gaining in Atlanta, but they're losing in Savannah or Augusta. They're actually gaining in those areas too, which is a problem for that Congress, for the state. If you're trying to win statewide, you need to have somewhere to be like, we can look at this area. This area is trending our way. But to my knowledge, there's not really somewhere in that district or in the state that looks favorable, that long term they can look to and be secure about. I don't know if Nick wants to add anything while I try to find this.
I just wanted to say, I think I read somewhere that this district was went to Mitt Romney and Donald Trump at the exact same margin. I think it was the only state in the country that did so. It was like a very minimal swing. And as you say, it's perfectly balanced. I think Union County was fairly static. I'm not sure about that. But then that's pretty much the breaking point. Like every point to the west of that has swung Democratic, and then every point to the east swung Republican. And Union
County is a mix of suburbs, and it's also a mix of rural areas. So this map is from J. Miles Coleman on Twitter. You should give him a follow.
Yeah.
You can notice the Charlotte wedge, as Jared was saying, trended blue. Every other county trended red, which is how it enabled the seat to stay. This is kind of the saying we have is that land doesn't vote. Is that this area really doesn't have, this Charlotte area is maybe about a third of the district population, and then the rest of the area is 2/3 of the district population. So you can notice this area, pretty much all of it, there's a uniform swing towards Dan Bishop, especially in the Robeson area, the Lumbee Indian population. Dan Bishop had run as a very pro-Lumbee candidate. He's supported federal recognition of the tribe, among other things. So that was kind of what they can look for there. And so on that regard, I think the other area to talk about is, aside from the House races, I'm going to pull up actually the House congressional map to kind of give you an idea of what Georgia looks like in terms of that area, because there are a couple of competitive districts in Georgia to pay attention to that we mentioned earlier, and they're kind of bellwethers for how the suburbs and the country will react to Donald Trump compared to 2016 when he won most of the states that we're talking about here. So this is the Georgia congressional map. I'm going to zoom into the areas that are kind of relevant to what we're talking about, which is the Atlanta, Georgia area. So you have the 4th, which is a minority area, majority minority district, the 5th and the 13th. These are all districts represented by African Americans. So they're not competitive at any level. And then you have the 6th and the 7th. And then you have the 11th, which kind of has this strange leg into the northern Fulton County. So I'll go ahead and give, to Jared to kind of explain the Forsyth County thing again, because this is kind of relevant, because Forsyth is the Republican part of the 7th district, which is an open race. The incumbent Republican Rob Woodall is not running for re-election, so it is an open race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you can see, Forsyth County is basically the anchor of the 7th district, but the 7th district goes very much into Gwinnett County, and as we already talked about, Gwinnett County is probably out of all the counties visibly trending most rapidly to the left. And so whoever wins the district this year, not only on the presidential level, but also on the congressional level, is going to have to either eat into the margins of Forsyth while also running it basically really big in Gwinnett, or basically keeping it very strong in Forsyth while keeping Democratic margins down in Gwinnett. And I don't think there's any doubt that the Forsyth side is going to vote red and the Gwinnett side is going to vote blue. But it's really a question about margins. And so that's sort of the make of the 7th district. And I think that because the Republican brand has become so toxic in the Gwinnett part of the district, it's not really wise for Republicans to try to prop up a hugely conservative candidate who's running unabashedly pro-Trump, who basically is going to be a rank and file choice behind his policies. Because the 7th district, even though it is ancestrally Republican, it's much more fiscally Republican than it is socially. And whoever wins there is going to do so by really capitalizing on the various different nuances and demographic differences that exist within the 7th district.
I believe it's actually a majority minority district at this point. It's not majority Black or Hispanic or Asian, but it is, the whites are a minority in the district at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say yes. You reminded me. Yes, it is a majority minority district, and in fact, the 6th district is whiter. And it's sort of interesting comparing the 6th and the 7th district based on recent elections, because usually they've been pretty uniform. The margins have been pretty comparable, but as we can see, the 7th district has remained ever slightly so more Republican than the 6th district, even though you can look at elections from 10, 20, 30 years ago, and the 6th district voted more Republican than the 7th on numerous occasions.
Mm-hmm. Another one to pay attention to, not short-term but long-term, to kind of see how the margin shifts, is the 11th district. The Republican in this district is at zero risk of losing, mainly because of Bartow and Cherokee County, which are absurdly Republican, so absurdly Republican that no Democrat has a reasonable chance of competing in the district. But it runs through Cobb County, through central Marietta, which is the area Jared talked about as trending Democratic, but also into the northern part of Fulton County, that's sort of the southernmost area of northern Fulton County, which has trended more Democratic than even the portions we showed of the 6th district. So looking at how the margin shifts there will also be important, even though the Republican is at no risk of losing the district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to comment on that, so Barry Loudermilk is the representative for the 11th district. And if you look at basically the county results for the different sections of the district back in 2018, Loudermilk won the Bartow and the Cherokee County parts, obviously. He also was able to win the Fulton County part, but he lost the Cobb County part. And usually the presidential candidates and Loudermilk himself have been able to win the Cobb County part of it. But again, because of the presence of Marietta and because of the bluing nature of sort of the immediate suburbs of Atlanta, that's going to be the area that's going to swing the district to the left. And when you're looking actually at the old 6th district, in fact, because the 6th district here is a lot more compact than it actually used to be in the times of, say, Newt Gingrich. The 6th district also capitalized on some of these sort of exurban or rural counties that exist right beyond the Atlanta area that are very heavily Republican. And so now that those are somewhat in the 11th district, it'll be interesting to see, in 10 years, how much it can actually counterbalance the major suburban and urban presence of the other parts of the district.
Mm-hmm. And it's worth noting while we're here that that Congressman Doug Collins, who is running for Senate, and he's probably the front runner to finish in first place in the jungle primary, is from Hall County. He's from Gainesville. And Hall is one of those exurban Atlanta counties that has kind of shifted more to the Democratic Party, even while remaining extremely Republican at all levels. It's shifted ever so slightly over the years to the Democratic Party. Whereas down in the South, where I think Jared was talking about this earlier, was what was the area you were talking about? Columbus, or was it?
I think I mentioned Albany. Yeah,
Albany, right there. Sanford Bishop's home. Yep. And so this district is majority minority. Pretty much every county in the district has experienced population decline, and pretty much every county in the district has shifted to Republicans at some level. But it's not a competitive district even now, and it won't be because it's a protected Voting Rights Act district. So we'll have to remain a majority Black district, and Republicans won't be able to make any feasible advantage off of any gains they're making in this area. So we've kind of gone in depth onto why the Georgia suburbs have shifted so far to the Democratic Party in recent years. But we don't want to make it look like that all suburbs everywhere are trending Democratic, because that's actually not the case. There are suburbs that have trended to the Republican Party, and there are exurbs that have done so. I know one of them is Long Island, which voted for Obama both in 2008 and 2012. I believe it also voted for John Kerry in 2004. Those actually, Donald Trump won the two Long Island counties, Nassau and Suffolk. He won them by a small margin. Nick, I believe you had one to mention as well.
Yeah. So when people think of a Democratic area, some people think of Orange County in California, because that swung massively in 2016 towards Hillary Clinton. But if you actually look at it, if you actually take a look into the demographic aspect of Orange County, you see there's not really much change there at all. It's pretty much just suburbanites who switched over, and they might be prone to switch back. Like for instance, in 2018, John Cox, was it the Republican candidate for governor? He almost won the county. It sort of reverted to the mean. So it's still Democratic, but I don't think we can expect that to be a deep blue anytime soon.
And also on that topic, if you look at Michigan, Macomb County in Michigan, which is basically suburban and exurban Detroit to the northeast, is another county that's shifted very much to the right in recent years. Donald Trump won it by around 12 points, which is a huge shift from 2012 and Obama's victory in the state. And so that's a county that we're going to be watching and back talking about the election. In 2020, we're going to see whether that actually is able to maintain a very strong victory for Trump, or if it's going to reverse back to sort of the Democratic column. And then finally, looking at Florida, there are various counties in Florida that are actually shifting to the right that are also suburban counties. A few that come to mind are Volusia County, also St. Lucie County, and also Pinellas County, which is basically Clearwater, and it's right to the west of, Tampa. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and one county similar to that in North Carolina is Brunswick, which is actually the fastest growing county in the state. And it shifted heavily to the Republican column because of snowbirds coming in from the north who are moving to the beaches to enjoy the Wilmington or Myrtle Beach area because it's connected both of those two economies.
You know, you guys, this is so fascinating, and I really appreciate that the really granular analysis that you all do enables viewers to really kind of geek out on a demographic and historical context and state by state, county by county, congressional district by district, and really understand the nuances of these races in a better way than they might going just off of sort of the traditional high level suburbs are trending this way, red states are trending that way, purple states, you know, under Trump and a midterm and a presidential year. There obviously are much more specific and insightful analyses at play here. In particular, obviously, the main one you're talking about here is that Georgia may be going blue quicker than people think, or at least turning sort of solidly purple quicker than people think. And North Carolina, by contrast, may not be coming quite as competitive or Democratic friendly. And just to sort of illustrate that, because this is not something I think that is fully appreciated or agreed with among prediction market traders. So for those among our audience who do trade on sites like Predictit, this may be an opportunity if you buy our mapping experts thesis here. And I think it's safe to say they're all basically in agreement on this. And if you look on this page, these are the Georgia-related markets on Predictit, in particular the three. You see top, middle, and then on the left and then the right, the two Georgia Senate races in 2020 and which party wins the presidential contest in Georgia. Each of those are trading in the mid 60s and versus North Carolina, I believe, is trading at something like 53% for Trump to win in the presidential. And it sounds like, you know, given that Trump won it, is this right, guys, by 4 or 5 percentage points, I think the popular vote in Georgia in 2016, that if, if these trends, these rapidly, a rapid blue shift is underway in Georgia without, as you put it, the Thanos style offsetting red shift elsewhere in the state that you see in North Carolina. I'm fairly convinced that Georgia is a lot more of a toss-up state than the professional forecasters would have us believe, that all kind of have it in that not safe Republican, but kind of leans or likely Republican. And that certainly compared with a more traditional toss-up state like North Carolina, Georgia is one that Trump and Republicans might want to be worried about, and one that political traders might want to keep their eye on in terms of Trump's odds being overvalued in those markets. With that, Eric, I want to toss it back to you guys. Give us your final thoughts on these races and anything else you're looking at.
So one final thing on that race is that Senator Perdue actually put out a internal discussion within the Republican Party, which presented kind of a dire forecast. Obviously, you have to take that with a grain of salt because it's internal. He's trying to fundraise, and it's easier to fundraise when you have a doom and gloom message. But his message was more or less that Georgia is a toss-up, that it's going to be competitive. So with that, I think it kind of concludes this episode of the Map Room. I'd like to thank Jared and Nick for being on the panel today. You can find our articles on Elections Daily. We're all writers on the website. You can go to the contributors page and you can find a list of our articles under our author pages. But where can we find you on social media, Jared and Nick?
Go first, Nick.
Yeah. Should I go first? So my handle is TossUp Report on Twitter. You can find me there. And as Eric said, you could check my profile on Elections Daily. I've written 1 or 2 articles for them, and there are probably more on the way.
And that's the same for me as well. My Twitter handle is @JStonePolitics. I've written a few articles for Elections Daily, so you can look me up there too. But Twitter is basically my main platform for this election stuff. So feel free to access that. DM me if you need to. If you have any questions or have any suggestions for new content, that's where I'll be.
And you can find me on Twitter @DE Cunningham too. DE Cunningham too is where you can find my stuff. I post maps, Dave's redistricting app stuff, and also articles on Elections Daily. I tend to retweet most of the articles that come from Elections Daily as well. So you can find those there as well. But thanks for watching, and be sure to be tuned in next week for the next edition of The Map Room.